While I was eating the cake, my son-in-law Howard came to pick up my grandson Noah. We are still eating cake, so wait a bit. I looked at my watch and saw that it was just before 8 p.m. I was in despair that the good time would pass so quickly. Hey, Howard. I wonder if I can stay here with Noah. No, that's not quite right. My mother is waiting for me at home. Just as I was about to give up, Noah unceremoniously finished the cake. Come on, Noah. Let's go quickly. Howard tried to pull Noah's hand, which still had cream around his mouth. When I stopped him and said, "At least wipe your mouth a little more," I heard what sounded like a lisp from Howard's mouth. Howard suddenly picked up a tissue and roughly wiped Noah's mouth. Why does he want to go home so soon? I know his mother is waiting for him at his parents' house, but still. Thinking of this, I looked at Noah and saw him staring at me with tears in his eyes. It was as if he was appealing for something. Hey, Howard. Aren't you being a little rough? He pulled Noah's arm and left the room in a flash, not even bothering to stop me. I didn't even get to say goodbye. Stunned, I stared at the place where Noah had just been eating cake. Suddenly, I noticed Noah's strips of paper fluttering and swaying beside him. The strips of paper were hanging on the inside of the tree, so that the wishes could not be seen. I wondered what Noah had asked for. Muttering to my husband, I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw its contents. Oh, honey. This is a little. I am Mary, a housewife. Today, I went into a room to wake up my daughter Irene. Irene. Wake up quickly. Irene is now a working adult. I know it's my role to wake her up in the morning, and it hasn't changed since she was a little girl. I know. Unaware of my impatience, Irene is squirming around in the futon. Hey. Dad, he's already gone ready. William, my husband, is usually an early riser, but today he was up even earlier than usual. Apparently, he did not sleep well last night. He had just made a pot of coffee to help him sleep. Dad, you always do that, don't you? Making some excuse, Irene finally saw the time on the clock on her cell phone screen and jumped up. What? Is it that late already? Why didn't you wake me up earlier? Why must it be my fault? Don't blame me. It's your schedule, isn't it? With my daughter slamming into the door and getting ready, I went downstairs. Irene has always been a fast-paced child. She may have been an only child, but as a parent, I was a little worried about her. She was about to turn 30, but I had never heard of her having any affairs. That is, until a few days ago. A few days ago, when Irene suddenly broached the subject, my husband and I thought we were going to lose our backsides. I'm going to bring my boyfriend on my next vacation. Seeing our daughter tell us so matter-of-factly, we even thought there must be some kind of mistake. What? You have a boyfriend? Irene laughed at my outraged voice. Didn't I tell you that? Isn't that rude to say such a thing? Hey Dad, I mumbled and looked at my father, but my husband seemed more surprised than I was. Right. He is clearly upset. My daughter, at her age, is bringing her boyfriend. Could this be marriage? I thought so, but I dared not say anything about it. How long have you been together with your boyfriend? I asked her at least that much. Well, about 6 years. I was absolutely stunned. I had been by her side since she was a little girl, and I had raised her. I had not been working, and I had tried to keep an eye on any changes in my child. I heard about her problems, and people around me were even envious of her as a close father and son. And yet, she had a boyfriend of 6 years. It makes me feel quite lonely. Where does he live, that man? My husband, noticing that I was at a loss for words, asked Irene a further question. Let's see, it's about a 10-minute bike ride from here. It's in the 3rd Middle School District. The 3rd Middle School is the next school district in the same city. I asked him more about him and found out that he was a classmate of mine in high school. They were just classmates when they were in high school, but after they met again at the coming-of-age ceremony, we started hanging out together frequently. At first it was just a few people who hung out, but before long they started seeing each other, and then he confessed his feelings for her. It was right around the time she was leaving college to start working, and she didn't want to stop seeing him, so she decided to be his girlfriend. It lasted longer than I thought it would, Irene laughs, perhaps embarrassed, as she watches TV, which she does not normally watch. My husband and I decided not to pry any further and wait for the day to bring them home. And today, Irene overslept, even though her boyfriend was finally coming over. Did Irene wake up? My husband asked me as he read the newspaper. Yes. It's such an important day, and she's just. I sighed, and my husband let out a small coughing sound, and a silence fell between us, but it was not uncomfortable. We don't have to say anything to each other to know what the other is thinking. We are that kind of couple. However, I thought about my daughter as well, so I would like to believe that she is fine with her husband, although I can never be absolutely sure. In the meantime, Irene comes clattering down the stairs after getting ready. Hey, Irene, you're going to make the other parents' parents have a bad impression of you. Irene laughs and says, after taking a cup of tea in the kitchen. It's okay. I've been there several times already, and it's not the first time. Besides, I look good on the outside. Well, I'm off. Then she ran out the front door with another flurry of noise. Irene is now going to the other party's house to pick up her boyfriend. There, she would greet his parents briefly, and then they would come to our house together. Are you sure she's okay? I had no words to reply to my husband's musings. We feasted on lunch at his house and Irene took him back to our house. My husband's nervousness seems to have reached its peak. He hasn't moved a muscle since a few minutes ago and hasn't spoken a word. My name is Howard Russo. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today. The young man introduced himself briskly. But my husband remained silent, staring straight into his eyes. He didn't just look nervous. His brow was wrinkled. Is there something wrong with him? He seems to be a nice young man in my eyes. Hey, Dad. When I called out to my husband, his eyes changed color as if he had come back to himself. No, I'm sorry. It's the first time my daughter has brought a boyfriend here, and I got nervous. As he spoke, the master's face returned to its usual expression. I'm going to cut the muck and get straight to the point. She is as impatient as ever. I worried that she was really okay at his parents' house where he was just a few minutes ago. No, Irene. Let me do the talking properly here, okay? Irene, who was about to speak out in front of me, was controlled, and Howard took a deep breath. Is it that important to talk about it already? I am sure my husband must have thought so too. We straightened our backs and waited for Howard to speak. This is the first time I have come to greet you today, and I know you will be surprised at my suddenness. We heard someone clearing his throat. I have been in a relationship with Irene for about 6 years. This time, we have discussed it together. Irene stared at Howard's face. Her expression was the kindest smile I have ever seen. We came to the conclusion that we would get married. Both my husband and I waited for what he would say next. I would like you to approve my marriage to Irene. Howard was already starting to slur his words. He must have been very nervous. Oh my God, Howard is so slow. You're so slow. Irene, unable to bear the sight, interrupted. I mean, thank you, Father and Mother, for taking such good care of me. No, I don't think you're ready for that line yet. I couldn't help but blurt out, watching the exchange between Howard and Irene. I looked at my husband and saw that he was giggling about something. Dad, don't cry yet. No, I'm not crying. With a slap, Irene's mood takes over. Once again. Howard raised his voice to tighten the atmosphere. Please let me marry Miss Irene. After saying this, he bowed deeply. My husband wanted to say something, but he let out a small and said, She is such a slow-paced girl, but I have raised her with great care. Make sure you make her happy, he told Howard. His head bowed deeply, and then he looked up quickly and said with a sparkling smile, Yes. I promise, he declared. Thus, Irene and Howard's marriage was decided. In the blink of an eye, the meeting of the two families, the wedding ceremony, and their newlywed life had begun. Irene moved into her new house like a storm, but she still came to visit us from time to time. Sometimes alone, sometimes with her husband. After seeing her off for the season a few times, Irene said to me, Hey, Mom. The day has come for me to become a mother. My hands stop cooking dinner. Irene is my mother, which means I am going to be a grandmother. I can't believe that such happy news suddenly came to me. Mother. Irene called out to me as she looked into my face. She must have been surprised when I suddenly stopped moving. Congratulations, Irene, and thank you. I hugged her. No, Mom, you're embarrassing me. Irene said so, but remained at his mercy. After hugging her for a while, I said, Well, if you're going to be a mother, you should at least help me prepare dinner, and I made fun of her on purpose. She rolled up her sleeves and said, Even though I look like this, I used to cook even when Howard and I were together. The seasons passed again, and a long-awaited grandson was born. Howard's parents were very happy because he was their first son and their first grandchild. My husband and I were reserved in a token way, but on the night we came home from seeing our newborn grandson, we made a toast together. You are a grandfather too, aren't you? I said, deeply moved, and my husband sniffed. No wonder we're getting old. And the two of us toasted one more time. 4 years have passed since then. Irene and Howard were both working, so she occasionally came to visit her son Noah. Each time, I was concerned that she was looking a little worn out, but Tatsuya told her, he's just busy with work and raising his child. It's okay. Irene would smile. I now have a picture of that smile in front of my eyes. Today was Irene's funeral. It was all I could do to keep my consciousness normal. Irene, in her portrait, is about to jump out and say, "Mom, you are worrying too much." As if to shake off the sorrow that was welling up inside me, I turned my attention to the people in attendance. Many people, including coworkers and classmates, were saying goodbye to her. The girl in tears was Brianna, who had been with her from elementary school to high school. He finished burning incense with the support of the other children and bowed to us. Come to think of it, they used to come over to my house often. They have always been her friend. I bowed to everyone who came to my house, vaguely thinking about such things. I wonder how many people have loved Irene. She was a cheerful girl, though her pace was slow. I saw my daughter burnt in the crematorium and reduced to only her bones, but I still couldn't really feel it. On the bus ride back to the funeral home, Noah snuggled up to me. "Hey, Grandma." He looked like he wanted to talk to me. "Why is everyone crying? Where did Mommy go? She's coming back, right?" He grabs my arm with his little hand. He is only 4 years old. He won't understand. I picked him up from daycare, went home, and was involved in an accident when I went out to the nearby supermarket because I had forgotten to buy something. Just a few minutes away, Noah was at home watching TV. He waited alone for his mother, who did not come home easily, and was eventually taken to the hospital by his father, who returned in a hurry. To a 4-year-old child, this would have been nothing short of a nightmare. What should I say? I was lost for an answer when my husband, who was standing next to me on the other side of the room, called out to me. "Noah, we're lonely without Mom." He nodded with a scowling face. "Grandma and Grandpa will be with us from now on." Noah nodded his head, not understanding what was happening. Noah's mother became a star. When he looked out the window, he saw a star shining brightly. I wonder if it is that star. I pointed my finger and told Noah. She can't come back if she goes that far away. I guess he must have somehow guessed. Noah said nothing more. Tears finally spilled from my eyes as I gazed blankly at the stars. Irene's funeral was over, and we were having dinner with relatives. Howard and my husband were talking about something. With Irene's death, my husband was thinking of raising Noah in our home. My husband is still working and I am a housewife. Howard's father passed away last year. His mother was a little older than us, and her legs were a little worse. He may have been concerned that it would be tough to raise Noah by himself, but Howard answered clearly, "No, I will raise Noah on my own." I could not force him to do so. I tried to calm my husband, who seemed unconvinced, and reminded Howard, raising a child with only one hand is a lot of work. I reminded Howard. I understand. But if we leave Noah in the hands of you, he will lose not only his mother but also his father. Besides, he clenched his fists in frustration. I want to raise this child well, even for Irene's sake. He seemed determined to do so. I understand. It's your child, isn't it? But if you have any problems, be sure to talk to me. Noah is our precious grandchild, too. When I told him this, Howard nodded vigorously. My husband was still not convinced, but he said to him, "Hang tight." However, a few months later, Howard was to be transferred to a distant place. He reported to our house by phone. It was 3 years later that I was able to meet Noah, the only grandchild left behind by his only daughter. I had tried to call Howard many times to at least hear his voice, but often he was busy with work and I could not get through to him. Even when I did get through, I could only hear Noah's voice for about 3 minutes at most. Both my husband and I were bothered by the fact that we could not even properly convey our congratulations to Noah on his birthday or when he entered elementary school over the past 3 years. So we decided that this year would be the year, and tried repeatedly to contact Howard. Finally, he agreed to come to our house for Christmas. He was busy with his work, and I thought maybe he could come to our house for Christmas. I thought that Howard might be busy with his work or might be in a relationship with a new woman, so I decided to make this the last time. If it was to be the last time I could spend time with Noah, I decided to make it memorable, so I bought a big Christmas tree. On the day of the party, I prepared a feast and waited for him in the morning. I prepared presents for birthdays and elementary school entrances that I had not been able to celebrate before, and was excited to imagine Noah's smiling face. In the evening, Noah and Howard arrived. "Welcome, we've been waiting for you. Noah, this is your grandmother. Do you remember me?" I crouched down so that I could meet Noah's eyes. But Noah turned his head away. I wondered if he had forgotten me because he hadn't seen me for a long time. "Hey, Noah. Say hello properly." When Howard said this, Noah stiffened up, then turned his head toward me and showed an unnatural smile. "Hello, thank you for welcoming us." I felt somewhat uncomfortable, but I was more happy to see him for the first time in a long time. "Come on in." I led Noah and Howard into the living room. When Noah came to the living room, he looked at the big Christmas tree on display. "It's a big tree, isn't it? My grandmother bought it with her own money." Noah's master spoke softly to Noah. Looking at Noah's back as he looked up at the tree silently, he said, "Come on, Howard, sit over there, too." Howard, however, said, "No, I'm fine. I'm going back to my parents' house, so I'll come back to pick him up in a while," he said softly and motioned something to Noah. Noah looked at Howard anxiously, but as if ignoring his gaze, Howard headed for his parents' house. "He seems to be uncomfortable with us because Irene is not here." Even Noah already seemed uncomfortable. 3 years must be too long not to see each other. I was too selfish, after all. They have their own new lives. I decided that today would be the last time I would see Noah. So let's make it a pleasant time. "Noah, come here." I called Noah, who was sitting in the living room without doing anything. "Open the refrigerator." Checking my expression, Noah slowly opened the refrigerator. The moment he saw what was inside, his face lit up. I made everything for Noah. "Grandma, I worked too hard." Noah laughed out loud when I stuck out my tongue and smiled at him. "I'll let you eat it right away." I told Noah to wait in the living room to heat up the food. In the living room, my husband was preparing a DVD for children. Is there anything Noah likes among these? Noah made his choice, and as soon as the TV started showing images, my husband came to the kitchen. I haven't seen him in a long time, so even though he's my grandson, I'm nervous. With that, I took out a beer from the refrigerator and returned to the living room. As I warmed up the food, I kept Noah and my husband in my mind's eye. Then I wondered what would happen. The look in my husband's eyes, which had been gentle until a moment ago, suddenly turned sharp. Noah was at the other end of his gaze. What in the world was going on? I was surprised at the look in my master's eyes, as if he was holding back his anger, and involuntarily called out to him. Come on, the dishes are getting warmed up. I'll get them ready, and you can help me. I thought I was calling for my husband, but Noah shook and came quickly over to me. Oh, no. It's okay, Noah, take your time. Can you go get Grandpa? Noah said, well, but I'll help you. His voice was barely audible, but he certainly said so. We had not been able to have a conversation since we arrived at our house earlier, but he finally spoke. That was all it was, but it made me happy and I said, well, can you carry this for me? With that, I decided to accept the favor with Noah. I'll help you, too. With that, my husband came to the kitchen and the three of us prepared for the party. As we ate, I asked Noah what had happened so far. I asked him if he was getting along with his father and if he had made any friends at school. Noah was at a loss for words at some points, but he told me about the past 3 blank years. His voice sounded somewhat like Irene's. However, he was speaking too politely for a child, as if Howard was telling him the story properly. The meal was over, and all that remained was to serve the cake. I was just about to clean up a little before that when Noah asked me quietly, "Excuse me, Grandma. Do you have a piece of paper, a pen, and a rubber band? What would they be used for?" Noah told me that they used to hang a piece of paper with a written wish on it on the Christmas tree. Is that like the strips of paper used for the festival? Noah nodded and told me. When Mom was still around, we used to make wishes on the Christmas tree. She laughed and said it was nice to be able to make a wish twice a year. It was a very Irene-like idea. I quickly punched a hole in the paper and threaded a rubber band through it. Then I handed him a pen and told him, after we hang up our wishes, let's eat cake. While we were eating the cake, Howard came to pick us up. We are still eating cake, so wait a bit. I looked at my watch and saw that it was just before 8 p.m. I was in despair that the good time would pass so quickly. Hey, Howard. I wonder if I can stay here with Noah. I decided to make this last, but I didn't want to say goodbye to him. No, that's not quite right. My mother is waiting for me at home. Just as I was about to give up, Noah unceremoniously finished the cake. Come on, Noah. Let's go quickly. Howard tried to pull Noah's hand, which still had cream around his mouth. Howard tried to pull Noah's hand, which still had cream around his mouth. When I stopped him and said, "At least wipe your mouth a little more," I heard what sounded like a lisp from Howard's mouth. Howard suddenly picked up a tissue and roughly wiped Noah's mouth. Why does he want to go home so soon? I know his mother is waiting for him at his parents' house, but still. Thinking of this, I looked at Noah and saw him staring at me with tears in his eyes. It was as if he was appealing for something. "Hey, Howard. Aren't you being a little rough?" He pulled Noah by the arm and walked out of the room, without even bothering me to stop him. I couldn't say a final goodbye. Stunned, I stared at the place where Noah had just eaten cake. Suddenly, I noticed Noah's strips of paper fluttering and swaying beside him. It was hanging on the inside of the tree so that no one could see his wish. I wondered what Noah had asked for. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw what it said, murmuring to my husband, "Oh, honey. This is..." When I showed the strip of paper to my husband, his face turned bright red and he immediately left the house. His face was filled with anger, a look I had never seen before. The master, who had left the house in the shape of a demon, returned a few dozen minutes later. He seemed to be struggling at the entrance, but that voice was Howard. I thought he came to the living room and said, "Wait for me there. If you run away, I will not forgive you." He shouted at her and went up the stairs to his room. I could roughly understand what my husband was trying to do. It would be about what was written on Noah's strip of paper. It would probably be a long discussion. When I was about to prepare tea, my master came back from his room. "There is no need to serve him tea. You, too, come and sit down," he said to me and sat down on the sofa in the living room where Howard was waiting. I followed him and sat down next to him. Howard was nodding his head. He's muttering, "Why am I supposed to be here?" In my husband's hand was a voice recorder he had brought from his room, and after turning on the recording switch, he put it on the desk. "You know best why you were brought here." Calmly, my husband asks, "What have you done to Noah?" Perhaps thinking he could no longer hide it, Howard now clicked his tongue so that he could hear. "What did I do to him? I didn't do anything. I just disciplined Noah." His voice was even filled with anger. "Disciplining, you say?" My husband's eyes flashed sharply. "Are you telling me that it's just discipline to raise your hand so much that it leaves a bruise on a little boy like that?" Apparently, my husband had noticed. When we were watching a DVD together, I noticed unnatural bruises on Noah's neck and on the back of his hands. So the eyes staring at Noah were sharp. That's our way of doing things. Don't let others interfere. Howard's attitude was no longer the same as when Irene was around. He seemed to regard us as mere strangers. "I'm a stranger to you, but Noah is my grandson. I will interfere." My husband, defeated, retorted. "When Irene passed away, you declared that you would raise him single-handedly, right? That you would raise him." Tears welled up in my husband's eyes. "But why? Irene, who passed away, would not be happy at all when Noah is like that. I think Irene raised Noah well. He was only 4 years old at the time, and he was so naughty that he would run around the house. He was a child who ate a lot of food without hesitation. Today, Noah looks at other people's faces and only touches about half of the food I prepared today. If I had raised him normally, he would not have become such a quiet child in just 3 years." After a few moments of silence, Howard started talking again. "I wish Irene had been there. Noah, he hardly ever listens to me. The voice recorder on the desk records his small voice. He was screaming, "I want my mommy, where's my mommy?" At first I tried to calm him down, but he wouldn't listen at all, so I yelled at him. Howard's voice gradually became louder. He was scared of that. He looked at me with frightened eyes. "Isn't that funny? I'm his father." Howard continued, laughing like a madman. "He's scaring me, and it's driving me crazy too." After saying that much, Howard stared at his hands. "Oh, God, don't." I didn't want to hear any more. I wanted to see Irene, too. I wanted her to come back. But that's impossible. This time he looked up to the heavens and then covered his face with his own hands. We couldn't stop Howard from laughing like a broken man. My husband took out his cell phone and called someone. Howard's eerie laughter eventually turned to tears, and he sobbed, wincing. "I've called the police. I understand your loneliness, but that doesn't mean it's right to raise your hand against a child." Howard's cries echoed throughout the room. How could you notice it?" I handed Howard over to the police and we talked together. Noah's strip of paper had written something that I couldn't believe my eyes. "May mommy come back and my daddy return to a daddy who doesn't blabber about me." At first I didn't notice it, but during our discussion, when I looked closely, I could see discoloration on Noah's body in some places. You see it all the time in court, bruises on children. My husband is a judge. It seems that the person who called him earlier is also a police officer who knows him. Considering that guy's mental state and all, I doubt the charges will be that serious. Then Noah is still going to continue. I was horrified. I wondered if the day would come when Noah would be hurt again. No, let's do something before that happens. After that, I went to talk to the lawyer's office and the Child Guidance Center in person, relying on my acquaintances and contacts. I had no idea about the law, but I was able to get Noah adopted. Howard's mother, perhaps feeling sorry for what her son had done, did not object to our taking Noah in. Howard himself must have cooled down after being taken care of by the police. Without any particular dispute, he relinquished his parental rights. Thus, Noah became our child. At first, he was bewildered by life in an unfamiliar town, but that bewilderment gradually disappeared as he made friends at his new elementary school. And his reserved personality was becoming a thing of the past. "Hey, Grandma, can I invite my friends over sometime?" He seems to have become a part of our home. The cheerful personality he had always had is really just like Mother's. One day after school, Noah came home with his friends. They were all playing games in the living room. I couldn't help but smile at the sight of Noah laughing around happily, saying things like, "Wow." A gentle breeze blew softly into the room, the curtains were fluttering, and the sunlight reflected on Irene's picture. In the smiling picture, Irene seemed to be smiling more than usual.